Good afternoon. I'm here today with Melinda Dooley and Shannon Sauro. Sorry, is that pronunciation correct?
I say Sauro.
Well, it's your name, so then I say Sauro too.
Yeah.
Thank you. And we're in Padova, Italy, at the Europol 2015 conference. Thank you for your time. And I saw your presentation yesterday about research ethics, so I wanted to talk to you today. Thank you. But first of all, can you tell me a little bit about who you are and how you got to be here? Melinda.
Yes, thank you. My name is Melinda Dooley, as you've said. I work at the Universidad Autónoma de Barcelona, or Autonomous University of Barcelona. I've been there for 23 years now. I am a teacher educator, and I do most of my research in technology-enhanced language learning, specifically project-based language learning.
Okay.
And that's very much related to the project that you saw in our presentation yesterday.
Okay, thank you. And Shannon?
Yes, I work at Malmö University in the very southern part of Sweden. I've been there for 3 years. Prior to that, I was at the University of Texas in San Antonio, and in both places I do teacher education, mostly for teachers to teach English, also at the primary and secondary level. So a lot of my research involves classroom practice for language teaching, and that includes, among other things, telecollaboration.
Okay, thank you.
I'm also a teacher educator.
Yes,
That's how we know each other.
Yeah.
Actually, I was going to ask how you first came to know one another professionally.
This is Randy's fault.
No, we met in a conference in south of Spain. I'm sorry, in south of England. Yes.
At Ball?
Yes.
Okay.
She doesn't remember. I do. I went to her presentation.
All right.
Yeah, we
Well, I
met
don't
there
want to cause a rift.
first.
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Okay, and now you're working together. So yesterday you were talking about Connect. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Melinda's going to start because it's really her brainchild, and it's
Okay.
a terrific attempt to really bridge countries and push this tool, this practice of telecollaboration into the 21st century.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a Spanish ministry-funded project. It's a research project. I applied in 2002. We got the project 2003, but we didn't get the money till 2004. So 2013, 2014. And the idea is to do both a bottom-up, a little bit of top-down from the researcher's perspective, but it's a project that spans 4 continents with the researchers. We're going to work very closely in collaboration with 2 schools, primary ed, 3rd graders. I think 7 and 8-year-olds would be about the age, one in Catalonia, near Barcelona, and the other one in the US. And then we've got a junior high, in American English is junior high, middle school, of 12 to 13-year-olds. Again, one in Spain and the other one in Sweden, which is where Shannon's going to be my collaborator. In the US, it's Dr. Randy Sadler, who's a researcher collaborator. And what we're trying to do is a lot has already been discovered, we think, about what is an effective telecollaborative project. Even if this has not been disseminated as it should be, but it's still considerable knowledge. And a lot is also being said about what our 21st century competence is. But we feel we want to push the envelope and try to really define what are we talking about, 21st century competences, and how can that then be carried over to help teachers actually put into practice the type of teaching they need to prepare their students for the imminent future and then the far future as well, especially 7, 8-year-olds. They've got a long way to go, so we're talking trying to have the skills they're going to need within 20 years' time. It's very hard to predict. So we're starting out with the basis of knowledge that we already have about sort of socially distributed cognition, about telecollaboration. We've been working for about a year on trying to pull together knowledge, literature review, extensive literature review, and right now we're in the process of working with the 4 schools involved, working with the teachers. They'll start designing a project which we will then share out the design amongst the researchers and other educational stakeholders, people who we don't usually call into education to ask them, do you feel that we're really addressing the needs that society is is going to have in the near future. That's it in a nutshell,
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
It's much more ambitious than
It's very
it
No,
sounds.
there's a lot of work involved, no doubt.
Yeah.
So you've got 4 schools. So 2 schools at junior high level will be telecollaboration, will be conducting telecollaboration, and 2 at elementary level.
Right.
So they'll be bicultural, bilingual projects.
In the Swedish, Spanish,
Okay,
English will be
the lingua
lingua.
franca.
Yes.
Okay.
In the project in the primary ed, we are working with a bilingual school in the U.S.,
Okay.
which is quite a novelty
Yes,
in the
it's
U.S.
interesting.
It's bilingual Spanish and English.
Okay.
So we haven't started the design of the project
Right.
yet. The only thing we do know is it's going to be arts and crafts 3D printing.
Okay.
Okay, so we want to bring in as much new technology as we can. The teachers were very excited about that, but they don't
Yeah.
know what they're going to do beyond.
Yes, yes,
Right.
yes.
And we haven't decided yet just the amount of language that will be used and in what aspect.
So we saw, we've seen quite a lot of telecollaboration at this conference. Actually, I mean, it's something I knew about, but I've learned a lot more this weekend. But you're moving beyond that kind of basic discussion. What do you like to do? That kind of thing. Very much towards projects, like creating, making things, doing things together.
I insist. I'm a bit radical on this one. They call me telecollaborative Taliban, but I don't feel that telecollaborate. You can't just exchange. You've got to.
You need to
collaborate. You've got
work
to
on
learn
something.
how to work together in
Mhm.
whatever medium, whether it's face to face or online. And so I'm a radical on that one.
Okay.
That's what I tell my students anyway.
Yeah. That's an exciting project.
Preach. I'm hearing it.
I know. You can also learn languages used doing tasks.
Mm.
Agreed.
Mm.
One stand, one moment's task, you finish it in a day. Yes. But to learn to telecollaborate for me, if we want these 21st century competences, it means learning long term, working with a group, whether you like that group, whether you get along with those members. There's so many different competencies.
Mm-mm-mm.
So that's what we want to explore.
Mhm.
I don't know if I'm leaving something out.
I don't think you're leaving anything out. I mean, there's a lot there,
Yeah.
but 2016, 2017, and it's a handbook of technology for second language teaching and learning.
Okay.
My co-editor is Carol Chappelle. She's the lead editor.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
her co-editor, I think is a better way of saying
Yeah.
it. But it's a collection of papers that encompass a wide range of research, like state-of-the-art papers on call practices, but also assessment and call. And Melinda's doing the telecollaboration chapter.
Okay, I see.
She did the telecollaboration chapter.
I sent it in. Yeah, it's there.
Who's the publisher?
Wiley Blackwell.
Okay, I see. Well, I'll look out for that. Thank
Yeah.
you. So what you were talking about in more detail yesterday, though, was some of the challenges that this kind of project presents for research ethics. And there's a couple of things that jump out. One of them is different international standards, and one is obviously working with students of different age who may or may not be viewed as minors or adults. So can you tell us a little bit about some of those challenges? Let's start with the age, I guess.
Well, we're working with young learners, some very young, but also teenagers. And one of the issues that you see when you do research is you have a consent form. Obviously, you give to the participant. When dealing with minors, a lot of countries will insist, of course, that someone who's responsible for the minor also needs to consent. But what we're finding is an issue as we're dealing with that middle school group, because there's some variability in age. But the way one of the countries operationalizes, minor legally under 18. But in Sweden, the way children are being socialized in school and in the Swedish Research Council's policy on giving consent, children between 15 and 18 are treated kind of like autonomous adults. So you don't need to give the consent form to their parents. In fact, they're being socialized through their education system as to have ownership over their education. They actually give feedback on the curriculum. They're supposed to know their own curriculum, and they're supposed to have a greater say in their education. So there's this kind of autonomy that is growing, that they're socialized into. Whereas in other countries, again, with 18 being the requirement, if we have a consent form that needs to make all countries happy, we've got variation in age. So now what we have to decide is, For the Swedish participants, do we send it, if any of them are 15, do we send it home to their parents as well, even though that countermands what Sweden requires, but maybe what, say, the United States would expect in any partnership, or even Spain. Spain doesn't require it. It would. Okay, so Sweden is kind of standing out of that. And you can see how when you're partnering ethically, different nations maybe have more or less protective stances on their population. And sometimes you can see how maybe you want a more rigorous stance if we look at research coming out of the pharmaceutical industry that may be carried out in countries where there is no consent required, or, and therefore people are being exploited. So if you're coming from a country that is protected, maybe you want to apply the same standards. However, when you're coming from a different background, and I'm going to say Sweden, you might say, well, we believe in empowering our population, and that 15 is not that young, that they are ready to consent. In fact, we don't need to go to the parents over something like this. So imposing external ethical regulations is actually disempowering our people and countermanding what we're training our children to think and believe.
This question stems from our first kickoff meeting. I think participants that came were a little bit surprised that I had this on the agenda as the last point, because I knew that we needed to discuss it, because I feel like this type, the telecollaborative research, we don't go into enough detail about what happens when we start crossing these virtual borders, because you know what's okay in your country. And as an editor of a series, Telecollaboration Education with Dr. Dowd, we have run into some ethical questions and almost legal battles at one point, which really got me started thinking a couple of years ago about how are we going to deal with this, because we're talking about extremely sensitive data that is being shared across national borders, and that data I can see if I'm sharing it with my colleagues where it's going and what's happening to it. But I can't see that if I'm sharing with colleagues in Australia. I can't control anymore what that colleague is doing, and whether that colleague is sharing that data, if that colleague has actually looked for the consent form to use these participants. What if and this has been a case that has actually happened with us, what if I publish a study where there was telecollaboration and I don't have permission from that other university, those participants, I don't have permission, and I publish on what they did, right? Have I reached some sort of ethical commitment here? And even if I'm only looking at my own participants, they still interacted in some ways. Right? So even if I don't talk about them, they're still part of that cohort. And this has created problems. This is why we sat down and actually Spain doesn't have a very elaborate system for reviews and whatnot. And so I had to do this already for my research group. So we had sort of some guidelines already set up.
Okay.
We've adapted them.
And Sweden's a little bit more stringent than...
Sweden has, the Swedish Research Council has guidelines, but again, this is their ideology. It's on the researcher to look at their rules and decide if any, what's considered, like high security information or sensitive information, and they identify what they consider sensitive. For example, ethnicity is sensitive information. If you're collecting sensitive information, then you need to go for a review. If you're not collecting sensitive information and you're happy with your consent form and you think you followed the rules, you judge for yourself.
That's
kind of how we're socializing these 15-year-olds. See, you could see that. This kind of, you're responsible for yourself in that regard.
Actually, that point brings up a couple of things. One discussion, there was a bit of discussion in your presentation yesterday about the word relevant information. What's relevant information for you?
Well, that question came up because they said, how can you know beforehand? And you may not know. But for example, we're looking at teacher practices, and we're going to be looking at the interactants and what they gain, what they're learning from this particular type of configuration of the learning process. We don't need to know their ethnicity. We don't need to know their socioeconomic background. It may be relevant in some other study. But what we're looking at just in the classroom practice. Now, it may be perhaps, as I come from an EMIC perspective, I'm an EMIC researcher, I look at what the data emerges from the data. If the teacher makes it relevant in the interaction, it may be something I need to know. If, and I've had this happen in the previous project, the teacher pointed out, she says, oh, she comes from a broken background. Don't expect much from her. That teacher made it relevant, right? And so I have information in that case, so I wouldn't discard it, but I wouldn't do a blanket type of survey, tell me everything, do you go to church? That would obviously wouldn't be relevant for students, but that's what I meant by we only ask for relevant information, because there are a lot of researchers that go out first with sort of a blanket, give me all the background information about each participant.
It's participant context variables that you see coming up in research on language development, because we understand that there are a lot of factors like home languages, or you might even say with older learners, study abroad opportunity, whether they've got different languages in the home or whatever. And these could be relevant if we were taking that approach, but the research questions we have, as Melinda is saying, are really more about the teaching practice, not necessarily on the student learning development. Like, we're not doing an outcomes-based study, a pre-test, post-test, where you might want to separate them into groups based on personal variables. So those personal variables are not relevant for our study, so we don't ask them. And that is a way of avoiding some of the areas that I think would be a minefield.
And the other,
can I just add something that's stemming from what she said previously? I think, as I said before, these are questions that we haven't really taken into consideration because we come from social sciences. If you come from medicine, you come from biology, it's very clear that you could do some serious harm to people. Or, these type of studies, it's obvious the type of damage that can happen. I don't think in social sciences, when you go into a classroom, we're here to help the teachers. What damage can we do? What harm can we do? And we're here to help. It's a benefit. So we don't necessarily think about, am I really protecting these subjects? And that's one of my key points for even getting started on this.
There is something out of social sciences that we keep talking about things that are related to identity. And since this has come up in other telecollaboration research, but this is a sensitive issue, and that has to do with the face. So we see this coming up in social science research and education research in the United States, where if someone was in a witness protection program or was hiding from an abusive spouse and their face appears in a publication or at a presentation because they weren't sufficiently anonymized, and somebody now finds out where this family, because of seeing the child, has moved to. So that's kind of the sort of thing medicine doesn't deal with, but it has come up in social science research. So we see a lot of care being taken.
And it's especially in this type of data that we're collecting, because Francesca Helm, who she's doing her PhD right now, and we've been working very closely, has data, for example, that the interaction, there are physical characteristics of the website where you can see if the woman is wearing a veil or not, right? That's going to influence the type of exchange. So then what do you do with that? We may have situations where the students are wearing certain identifying garb or jewelry, which will, as the interactants, it's inevitable that it orients somewhat the type of communication that goes on. So what do we do with that data? Do we leave that in? These are things that we'll also have to deal with, right? Because it's visual information that when you want to present it, even if it did have some impact on the type of communication that was taking place.
Well, given this many kind of potential dangers and possible kind of legal difficulties or impacts on students or participants in the study, you talked about being very vigorous in creating consent forms and so on, but then that in itself presents a problem, because institutions who see this huge piece of document arrive on their desk, or students who are presented with this, please read this and sign it, become maybe unnecessarily nervous about what the research is going to do. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Whether that happens.
Yes, it's happened to me, I'll admit. Also.
Yes, that
Yeah.
already occurred.
Mm. Okay, let's put it this way. Why is it not acceptable just to go to your students or your director or dean of faculty and say, I'd like to use students' data in my research. I'm not going to give away their names. It won't affect their grade if they don't want to participate. How about it? Is that sufficient, do you think?
No.
That's not sufficient. I mean,
Participants
how
have
little can we do? Or
obviously the participants have to give consent, especially if they're,
But I mean,
adults. Yes.
for the participants to give consent, what I mean is, can we go to the participants and say, do you mind if I use some of the stuff from our interaction in my
They would have
research?
Again, it goes back to the age factor. And at a certain age, yes, you can go to the participants and say, do you mind? And you would ask for individual consent forms. With the children, there were the smaller children.
Of course,
the younger, you go to the school center and ask for permission. They then have a policy as to whether they ask for all parents to send in a consent form, or if they have a blanket consent form at the beginning of the year. Right? But again, going back to your question, it can be too daunting at times.
Yeah.
What you've written out, okay, we will take great care to protect you from all of this, and then it scares them into thinking, oh my goodness, I'm in great danger.
So I guess a way forward would be to create the full document and maybe a précis.
Yes.
Maybe this is what this actually says in simple terms. It's not as scary as it looks. Face-to-face interaction.
Yes, and then you can also let them tick what they agree to.
Sure. Yeah. So,
Items.
I mean, to conclude, as we're going to see more and more international collaboration, I think it's getting more and more easy and common to do. Easy. But as we see more of it, where do you see this kind of going? What direction are we going in with ethical research?
Ethical issues?
Research
I think
ethics.
it's going to depend on what country you're in, because still, my read is some countries are at the vanguard of being really aggressively protective, and what they're encountering is maybe they need to scale it back a bit, because as you identified, sometimes when you've got too thorough a consent form and you give it to someone, it overwhelms them with the possibilities and the options. And, some participants and their parents may not have the reading level necessary for all that, so then you have to bring in translations or other individuals, and now it becomes, you can see how if you've got 3 people in the room trying to help you read a document that you have to sign, you might be like, what are you doing to my kid? This is scary. When all it is you're trying to make sure that you're as upfront and as open as possible. But sometimes that openness is overwhelming. So some places are scaling back in response. Other countries, though, maybe have had nothing really in place. Like I understand that Japan doesn't have the same.
It depends on the institution.
Okay.
I've worked at some places who are very, very, very rigorous. Other places where it's not really.
But there's not a
accepted.
national mandate.
It's still a little vague.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So that little vagueness is good. It gives flexibility, but some countries may be looking around and recognizing that they're going to be left out of partnerships if they aren't sufficiently able to guarantee ethical oversight for the research conducted in their country, because that leads to publication problems.
That was going to be my final question, actually, or the next question. The publishing.
I just say, adding to that, I believe it's associations like this, you recall, Calico, that need to be the ones who put forth, okay, right, we're not trying to control it or anything, but here are some model policies to follow.
Yes.
I do believe it's associations that are already doing research in this area, have experts in this area, who need to put this forth. So hopefully from here, something will come out of that.
Well, there are a lot of good models out there, actually. It's not so hard to find something to help you along. And thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.